I would like to call the February 6th study session to order at 7:36. Roll call, Brenda?
Member Pulaski?
Here.
Member Hall?
Here.
Member Patton?
Here.
Vice President Rollins Gay?
Here.
Member Carter here.
Okay, and I also want to thank our person, Jay Morris, for running the camera. Thank you so much on this cold evening. Are there any additions, corrections, or modifications?
No, they're not.
Are there any citizen statements? Well, to give time for anyone who could come forward, is there a call for executive session
No.
after this meeting?
No, there's not.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, aye. Oppose, same sign, motion passes. Excuse me, y'all, I'm hoarse.
Oh, dear.
Administrative briefings and reports.
There are none tonight.
Okay, then we'll move on to the action items. Don, did you want to
Yep.
talk or you want to?
Nope, I'll do this. So we do have two action items tonight that have to be handled individually. First is a resolution authorizing and directing the sale or disposal of personal property, a 2002 Chevy van and a 2002 Chevy van 2500 Express van is the model. And so we'll need a motion and a second for that.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, does anybody have any discussion? Roll call, Brenda.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Hall?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Rollins Gay?
Yes. Okay,
And then the second action item.
motion passes.
Yep, motion passes, thank you. 802 is a resolution authorizing and directing the sale of certain property in accordance with Illinois School Code 105, 5/5-22. This is the property at 1102 North Broadway, the old Washington School. We met in exec session earlier to discuss setting a minimum price, and the process for this attempted sale will be a public auction, which will be announced after this motion passes, assuming that it does. And so we would need a motion that includes the minimum price in its wording.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that the district authorizes the public sale of the property of the Washington School for the minimum reserve bid price of $75,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any discussions? Brenda, I will need a roll call, please.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Hall?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Rollins Gay?
Yes. Motion passes.
All right. Carol and I will work on getting it advertised and set up. I believe that the advertising takes place over a course of about 2 weeks or 10 business days, and so we will probably have an update for you about this at the next board meeting. I highly doubt that we will actually have had the auction take place before the next board meeting. So we will look forward to that. $75,000 minimum bid. Stay tuned.
Wow, thank you, Don. Now, Don, we're on our study topics, so I will turn it over to Don so he can introduce everybody.
Yes, so the first study topic is on restorative practices. We have Dr. Elaine Spungen, who's our consultant for restorative practice work. She's also the co-founder of Conflict 180. She's been working very closely with Dr. Woods, and so Dr. Woods joins her for this first part of the restorative practices study topics, and actually Dr. Woods is going to be up here a lot this evening. Lucky him. And so we'll start with an update around and kind of a report about the work that she's done at Urbana Middle School. So, Dr. Swami, take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
A little bit
You
louder.
have to be more close to close.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Thank you. Of course, it's the work that they have done, and I am a guide or sometimes a coach. And I want to begin by thanking all of you for supporting this work, because none of this could have happened without the leadership of the district and of the board. And I want to begin by inviting you to do a little slightly cheesy restorative exercise. These are the kind of things we do with the kids in the mornings, and even sometimes at staff meetings, and I've noticed at the racial justice meetings sometimes. So this is a variation of the superpower. The superpower exercise is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why? This is called the human superpower exercise. So we all have human superpowers like kindness, integrity, patience. So the exercise, I invite you to do this. You do not have to do this. One of the principles of restorative practices is voluntariness. So if you're interested in playing, and Scott's going to play with me maybe, Dr. Woods, by which I mean Dr. Woods, you turn to your partner, and there's an equal number of you, which is nice, and you say, for the month of February, if I could have any human, the month of February, that's where we're at, right? You can have any human superpower, what would it be and why? And we'll demonstrate if you're willing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So,
I now know why she asked me to sit with her. All right.
everything has a purpose.
So would you like to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I think I would like the superpower of love, because people in my house are sick, and instead of being irritated, I'd like to be loving instead.
Okay.
That's it.
No, I think I get it now.
Okay.
All right. I would like the superpower of listening, because I was told I needed to listen last night
Oh, all right. Okay, so
by my wife, in case you want.
we're not going to make you do this out loud unless that would be fun for you. No. I was going to just have you turn off your mics and do it in little pairs.
Okay.
And I encourage anybody behind me, I invite you to try it out, if you're willing. Okay,
Okay. We ready? Go ahead.
we just did it, so we're good.
Your mic is still on. Oh, they didn't go into threes. They didn't see, look at, they went into threes, not pairs. But that's okay. Why aren't you talking to anyone? What would your human superpower be? Super fast typing?
Maybe listening is better.
Ah.
That's important for recording.
So, see, I was thinking it had to be something I don't have at all at first, and then you said loving. No, she said loving, and I'm like, I know she's really like a loving, caring person. so
Right, yeah, but like, it's
It's
like.
not an absence.
But
of
there's
the-
an irritation. There's all the coughing and sneezing and miss work and miss school, and what I want to do is be
Oh,
loving.
yes.
Chicken soup.
Yes. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. Okay. I think the threes are still going. Okay. So the purpose of these little restorative check-ins is for people to get to know each other a little bit, to connect and to rehumanize each other, because it's harder to be mean to somebody that is human to you, that now you know I have sick people at home. So, you know, if my puppy wasn't doing well or whatever, it's just a way for kids and adults to start becoming a family. And so basically restorative practices are a way to like embellish our human superpowers. They're a way to become more kind, more patient, more, you know, with integrity with our own values. So hopefully that gave you a little taste. So we'll start with methods, and the data report today is comprised of 3 different pathways: observations that our team and teachers and administrators and even people like yourself made in the school, discipline data, which was archived, and a survey that we gave at the end of May, which we're not going to do at the end of May anymore, because now I know people don't want to see me at the end of May. But nonetheless, we got a really good response rate due to Dr. Woods's, I think, real value, internal value for having data. And the students took those on Chromebooks, and the staff had paper copies. So this is an excellent, excellent response rate in the field of surveys. People are very impressed. And I just want to say here that what we're going to talk about is like a snapshot. It was a moment in May, and schools are dynamic places. Organizations are dynamic places. So 2 months later, 2 months before that, it might have looked a little bit different. Certainly looks different now. So we want to take this data and use it as a map, and we also want to be cautious because it's a snapshot, right? And somebody might have been feeling, for instance, it's May, I want to get out of here. So we're going to talk about 5 things: advisory, discipline data, school climate, conflict circles, and the use of restorative practices by staff. So we'll start with advisory. UMS does advisories, an advisory, 20-minute advisory every morning. And that first year of their restorative practices, they shifted and invited all teachers to do something restorative during their advisory practice, something like what you guys just did, as many times per week as possible. So our questionnaire asked about those restorative practices during advisory, not just advisory in general. So here's a staff person who says, the restorative advisors are a great way to start the morning. Many students connect with each other who normally would not. We asked people throughout the survey to rate things with grades. I am now aware that that is behind the times, and that we're moving towards standard-based grading. However, it was something cute that the kids were, able to grade things. So advisory went up to a B from a D+ last year. And that's feedback that, we gave the school, and I know people worked really hard on making those restorative advisories more energized and more interesting, and it's really paid off. Also, 10% more advisories are doing restorative practices as opposed to something academic or something, educational, purely educational. 85% at least weekly and 44% most days. And 6th graders and leadership students, and this is a theme throughout. So leadership students are a small group of students. Last year there were about 30 people who were recommended, had to apply. And they were a very diverse group of kids. I worked with them last year, and they learned about conflict resolution, about restorative practices, feelings, values, de-escalation, and they consistently have rated throughout our survey the school as more positive. So they are even happier with the restorative practices in advisory. So our recommendations are mostly to keep up the good work and sort of not to flag, because sometimes you have to move on, your energy moves on to something different when things are going well. Invest in even more resources, because it can be hard for teachers to keep coming up with these little superhero activities. This is a book that I like to use. It's kind of expensive, so it's just something to think about. But having ideas for what to do with kids. And aim to pass the 50% mark. We're at 44% according to the self-report, so just a little bit more per week. Here's a student who says, I think advisory would be different if all advisory classes had circles every week. This would help gain trust and get to know students and teachers better. It would help to feel comfortable stating your opinions and saying things out loud that you usually would not. They're so sweet. So the discipline data is also positive, in the right direction. I have been part of circles and feel very positive about them as a staff person. We saw a particularly dramatic drop in fights in the fall, and that's common. We're sort of like starting off fresh after summer, and we have more energy. And then by the end of the year, a 13% reduction in referrals for fighting. Particularly, we saw a drop in repeat fights. So the same kids used to fight over and over and over again, and now they would have a circle and not come back and fight again. So that's a good sign in the right direction. Out-of-class referrals dropped by 20%, and a dramatic drop in suspensions, in out-of-school suspensions. One student said, have as many circles as you need to keep the students from conflicts with one student over another. Future challenges, in-school suspension is up a little bit, obviously not enough to neutralize the out-of-school drop. And as you know, we're still working on the racial disproportionality. The racial equity work is very complementary here with the restorative practices. So that's something we want to continue investing a lot of energy into so that we have a just system. So recommendations, there is a curve here that happens where there's like early enthusiasm when you adopt an initiative, and then there's sometimes like a flagging that happens right around here. So just to keep up that energy in whatever way that takes and enthusiasm. Increasing access to restorative options. So we had some people saying it was confusing. How do I ask for a circle? That sometimes there's gatekeepers, not official gatekeepers, not part of the system, but a staff person who's frustrated or tired who says, oh, honey, you don't need a circle. You're just having girl drama. And so trying to work on actually, Mrs. So-and-so, that's not your decision, if a kid wants. So these are all normal parts of a system where you're working out the tweaks. So one student says the school could have easier ways to contact for conflict circles. Revisiting discretionary discipline referrals. This is a constant recommendation around racial disproportionality, racially biased disproportionality, because discipline categories like defiance and disrespect ask a person to make a discernment, to make a judgment. Was this child disrespectful, or were they advocating for themselves? Are they assertive, or are they talking back to me? So in that bit of judgment, that's where the room for all kinds of biases come in. Gender bias, racial bias. So nationally, this is a nice place to start looking inside of ourselves to say, are we accidentally, inadvertently maybe, creating that bias within those categories? Because they're not observable. They're not like a person threw a pencil at somebody. And so similarly, continuing the work on implicit or unconscious bias. And just last Monday, UMS, during their racial equity breakout session, discussed this article about unconscious bias. So that work is happening through the racial equity as well as the restorative lens.
It's not one of you, all right.
Oh,
It's
I'm like,
someone else.
you may ask questions if you would like, but who's speaking? He was like a ventriloquist. So these are leadership kids in our sort of end of the year picnic that we had with them. So the school climate is also improving. There's a little report card that we made, and this is a 10-item climate questionnaire that we ask standardly. Asks about safety. Does somebody in the school care about you? Does what you do in the school matter? This is asked of all staff and students. They're not special for just students or just staff. So even teachers are asked, does what you do in the school matters? And care and respect. And so we have B, an average of B by staff, an average of C+ by students, up from C the previous year. And again, leadership students. These are students who are learning about restorative practices and conflict. Rate the school climate is higher. They feel more connected to the school. They feel more cared for, and they feel like they have more purpose. Staff, that all people agreed, students and staff, that staff care and respect their students at UMS, that the rules are clear, that the school supports learning, and the staff said that they feel like they have a purpose. They know that what they do in school matters. Both staff and students said they want to see more care and respect from the students. And of course, that is something that restorative practices works on. We do kindness, we do appreciation, like second step, but in addition. Talking about safety, students said they wanted things to be more fair, and the students felt that they needed more purpose. They weren't sure that what they do in school matters. So these aren't mild, but in the direction of wanting improvement. So overall, very positive. One recommendation is to involve more students in addressing conflict and climate, like those leadership kids that are having such a positive experience, and they're feeling more connected, and they get those engagement pieces more. Also important to, at this stage of the initiative, engage in a collaborative process to revisit the initiative, revisit disciplinary sort of practices with staff, because you always want to be tweaking. You want to be kind of, examining, tweaking, figuring out what's not working anymore, what doesn't feel fair. And this is already being talked about. Manette and Tracy are already starting to this initiative too, bringing the restorative practices like what you guys did here into classrooms, so outside of advisory, so that classrooms are also starting to feel reconnected. Here's a student who recommends that you try to talk to students more when they're angry instead of just kicking them out of class. And we know it's more complex than that. The general idea, though, of connecting and listening to each other. So conflict circles are what you would have with a facilitator who's trained when whether a more serious conflict has occurred, whether a fight or a theft, a microaggression or an insult, or we suspect that one is going to happen. So we ask everybody, whether they had ever been in a circle or not, several questions just about awareness. So some interesting data there. So 90% of staff knew what conflict circles were and said they would know how to initiate one. But only half of the students said that they knew what conflict circles were, and 30% said they would know how to initiate one. So there was some confusion there. That's something I think we're already working on, because this is last year's data. This is official participation data. So what I mean by that is there's an official spreadsheet that official circles are recorded in, but many teachers, because they were trained, would do informal restorative conversations or circles in the classroom, in the cafeteria, in the hallway. So we know for a fact that those didn't get recorded because of our survey. So this is the official data. We don't have the unofficial data. 76% of students in circles are African American. So that's a positive thing in that in some schools, circles are another nice thing that white students get. Like, it becomes another benefit for certain students. So we don't want to see that being repeated, at least in that way. Students are about evenly split between grades in terms of having circles, and 40% of staff said they participated in a conflict circle. 68% of students reported that it felt voluntary to them, which was a big improvement from the previous year. Another thing that we really pushed, because like I said here, you want to come into a circle not because you're coerced. So this is also something that we worked on that we feel really good about. So we also gave everybody who was in a circle, so this is a smaller percentage of humans, a fidelity and satisfaction measure. I have a little caution sign there, because you want to be careful when you've been in circles all year, but you have one measure in May, because you're summarizing your experience. And maybe you had a bad day the day you're doing the survey, or a great day. Maybe you just had an amazing circle or a terrible circle. So one of the things we're talking about now is doing them more, collecting the data more often, like every month. So we live and we learn. However, for what it's worth, we asked about listening and understanding, how effective the prep meeting was, how helpful the circle was overall, would you recommend it to others, how helpful were the actions, and how fair was the facilitator and respectful, because we want to have a facilitator who doesn't take sides. So circle keepers, people who have been trained in circles, whether they were in a circle keeper or not for that circle, basically gave circles an A. So the more you understand the process, you'll see the more positive you feel about it. So some of it is just, what is happening here? Leadership students, again, having worked with us all year, gave them a B. Staff circle participants, B, and the rest of the students said, they're okay. This grade is down, seemingly down from last year. And at the same time, I want you to know that, like, there's so many more circles happening and so many more staff doing them. So a piece of this is we have to be careful and cautious with the data. A piece of it is I think we want to look at fidelity again when you have a big influx of circle keepers. So it's like taking that with a grain of salt, but not ignoring it. One teacher says, continue with the restorative practices and increase their presence in the school in ADA and with parents. So recommendations are strengthen fidelity through ongoing assessment, training, and improvement, like you would with anything else. Because we saw that students seem to be a little bit confused about it, we want to increase awareness, and I think that actually the leadership students this year are now going around explaining what circles are, which is not my idea. It's Tracy and Manette, so that's really cool. And as we talked about, collecting the data a little more frequently, which is complicated, but probably better to do. What would make school better is for people to understand both sides of stories. So sweet. I like kids. We also asked staff how much they were using restorative practices in their daily lives and at work. These are some staff circle keepers at a little meeting we're having about a year ago, February. So 33% of staff said they had been in a circle keeper workshop. This is not a workshop like this where we just show you how to do little classroom activities. It is a workshop where you learn how to actually work with conflict. And those folks were significantly more likely statistically, well, to facilitate, but also participate in circles and refer people to circles. So their commitment and the use of this was higher because they were in these PDs. 40% of staff were in a circle, and those participants, as I said, gave circles a B. So basically, and then of course these folks are more likely to be these 40% because they had. So being exposed to it helps people use it. 70% of staff said they have used restorative practices at work and home in the past year. And then we asked them for examples of what they were using. Listening underneath, which is a big skill that we teach, where you listen and decode a difficult message somebody's saying into its feelings and underlying roots and values. Breaking bread, people starting to have lunch with students, lunch with each other, coffee with each other when they're feeling disconnected. Effective apologies and perspective taking is what people filled in most often. This is not a multiple choice. And then 76% said that they read the restorative newsletter that I send out most weeks. 50% regularly, which is true because my software says the same thing. And they gave it a B+ and said that they were more likely to then use restorative practices. But I don't know which is which. So the people who use this also read the newsletter or vice versa. So the recommendations are just to continue to invest in the professional development. And this is easier said than done because there's a lot going on at the middle school. People are in a lot of meetings. Racial equity is very important right now, and it's getting some great momentum. And at the same time, we see that if staff participate in professional development around restorative practices, they're more satisfied, they're more connected, they use it more. This is a person who says, this year I tried listening underneath and sharing a meal. It seems to be effective and creates some trust. I have been listening to others give their side before giving thoughts and opinions. It's making students and people in my life feel like their feelings are just as important as mine when conflict arises. So there's so many people who I want to acknowledge behind this slide who are not on that slide. And of course the UMass leadership staff and students. I'm not doing this work. They're doing this work every day in the trenches when challenging situations arise. Tracy Welch, who's facilitator extraordinaire and is spearheading a lot of where it's going this year. You, the district leadership support staff, which are behind the scenes over here. Dominic Barter, who's our mentor who presented at the ROE this year. And I'll leave you with these quotes. I believe restorative practices are great. UMass staff person. This school is better. I love this building. UMass student. So, questions, comments? Board members?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. This was a really valuable presentation. A couple of general questions. When you said 83% of students and 84% of staff responded to the survey, that's 6th through 8th grade, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because sometimes you pulled out, 6th grade students said this, but in all
Yes.
cases, all students were
Yes.
reacting to the various measures and so on.
Yes, and
right?
it wasn't all teachers. I have data. I brought my computer just because I have the more nitty-gritty data. I think it was like, I don't know, something like 85% teachers, and the rest was staff
Oh,
and
okay.
administrators. And yes, everything is for all students. We also ran statistical analyses to see if something was significant, and 6th graders and leadership students had significantly
Huh.
higher scores on a lot of things.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they were more satisfied.
And clearly, there's improvements in almost every area that you chose to, that you measured, which was positive and reassuring. I was just wondering, in your opinion, this sort of the overall climate grade, that the difference between last year and this, while it improved some, it still feels to me that, went up for staff from a C to a B and from students from a C to a C plus. In your opinion, given the size of UMS and the number of students and staff, is that reasonable progress? I mean, that feels minor.
Yeah, so
But,
you're wondering like how significant is a plus?
Right, and when you're still talking C, I mean,
Yeah.
it's from a C to a C plus, even though in all these other ways, it seemed like there was a lot of positive reports
Yeah.
on school climate, that overall.
I mean, to
Grade.
be honest, I'm impressed that in 1 year, there's a climate improvement, and I have to even say, I'd probably want to share the wealth, because lots of new things happen. You hired new social workers, right? Like, so improving climate is turning a big ship. Yes.
So moving
And-
the needle this much is
Yes, because we're talking about a 10-point scale.
reasonable. yeah.
Right? Yeah. So at the same time, I hear that like, yeah, we would like a B, which,
And it's reasonable to expect, as you said throughout, that if we continue the investment and the motivation and the commitment, that it's reasonable to expect that ship or needle will continue to
I think so,
shift ever so
especially,
slightly. Yeah.
especially because you're investing complementary initiatives. Because racial equity work is really important too.
Yeah.
And from looking at initiatives like this, for instance, in Oakland, which has done this for, I don't know, 10 years. If you look at them, it's up and down.
Is that right?
There are bad years, and people have hypothesized, oh, that was the year the mayor did such and such.
Ah, gotcha.
I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
it was the year the mayor did such and such.
Okay.
Because climate is such a complex thing. Your parents, right? Taxes, all kinds of things are going
Sure.
to impact it.
Okay.
So I would expect it to go up, but maybe like this,
This kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
and I don't know.
And just one more question. I assume we'll get a similar report from the U8, from the high school.
Yes.
And is it fair to assume that, since we've got middle school students who are working on this for 1, 2, and 3 years in some cases, when they move on to the high school, I mean, this won't be an effect that we'll see maybe this year, but maybe in a year or two, we'll start to see larger effects at the high school because they'll have, the students will have this sort of background experience that kind of puts them ahead of the curve when they enter high school? I mean, is that a reasonable expectation? Over the course of a few years, where then it becomes kind of internalized? Or,
I think, Scott, tell me, Dr. Woods, if you agree, at the middle school, it's affecting students who are having conflict more. It's having a stronger effect on the kids who are having conflict. Because they're getting restorative practices and advisory, and not necessarily in the rest of their classes. So what I might think about is students who have conflict a lot, developing those skills. And
Okay.
maybe then seeing less of that in high school.
okay.
I mean, does that make
It's
sense?
reasonable.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Great questions. I hear you want to know about the future.
Huh?
I hear that you are interested in the future.
Oh, yes, I think we are all very interested in the, yeah.
Along that tack,
Yeah.
I mean, this has been extremely successful in the middle school and the high school, and as Peggy said, there's a bridge as this culture is built. So, is there any notion to push this down into the elementary schools. And the challenge there is that there's 6 different buildings and not just one building. So is there giving any thought into how to go about doing that yet?
Yeah, and I think the team has been thinking about this. We did a little introduction to most of the elementary schools this year in the fall. So they participated in experiential activities the leadership did and the staff. And, we're working kind of at the moment, Dr. Owen, please add on here, with the leadership of the schools, leadership and staff. And also, I know that there's a little bit of work being done with kids, too. So there's small ways that we're introducing into the elementary schools and then seeing where is there more interest.
I think you summarized it very well. We've been working at the cabinet level, which is all administrators, building principals, and coordinators, kind of doing some trainings along those lines, but then also Elaine and some of the members of her staff have come in and done very targeted kind of introductions at our elementary schools with the entire staff. And some of our principals are going back to their staff so that they feel comfortable and using it in staff meetings, talking about how it might look in an elementary classroom. So I would say that we're moving slowly in that direction this year, definitely planting a seed for the future.
And then the other question I have is would this kind of approach be appropriate for Gerber? I mean, is this something that was given thought?
Yeah, so Gerber already does quite a bit of restorative work because of the nature of their programming, and they are actually also participating in the same kind of way. I don't remember, Elaine, if have you done a introduction to the whole Gerber staff?
So they were there when we did the Big Summer initiative, and I've also talked to Gerber a little bit, just about maybe tweaking some of what they're doing. So as Dr. Owen says, when you're in a therapeutic environment or a more therapeutic environment, you're already doing a lot of this. So I think everybody's thinking about it and thinking about their energy and not being over-initiative. That's an adjective. Initiated.
Any other questions? All right, you did a great job.
Thank
I
you.
know you do, and it's reflecting in the community. So I just want to thank you and continue to, like Peggy says, those kids are our future. So if you instill this, then they'll instill it in their kids, and it'll go on. So thank you.
Thank you. That's
Thank
my
you.
hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
All right, you're staying?
up next,
I'm
we'll just
staying here.
we'll move right
I'll
into
slide over.
you'll use the one that actually has a green light that works.
Yeah.
We'll move right into our next study topic, which is Dr. Woods presenting just kind of a quick overview of the Urbana Middle School school improvement plan, and also answer any questions that you have based on the information you were sent out earlier. So, Dr. Woods, take it away.
Everybody ready?
Ready.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening. It's been a while since I've actually been at a board meeting, so I hope everyone's well. This year, I was fortunate this year that we were able to expand our building leadership team to include now 11 teachers, 11 staff members who are involved in writing and implementing our school improvement plan. Our school improvement plan involves all of our staff. However, these are the leaders in the building that are planning and presenting to our full building and really doing a lot of the legwork on implementation. So I did want to make sure I gave them some credit because they've been really an awesome team this year to work with. So we started this, I would say school improvement plan never starts, it never stops. So when I say we started this last summer, really we've been doing some thinking on this continuously. The team this year decided on 2 big ideas for our school improvement plan. Literacy, which I will say is definitely the new area for us. not that we don't care about literacy, but to have specifically a literacy goal within our school improvement plan that's highly focused on one department building is a change for us. And then the other area would be positive behaviors. So I'll go into each one of these. And at the bottom, you see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Those are the three ideas from within each category that I'm going to talk about. So for reading intervention, we started some of this work last year. And what we are aiming at is, so I think most of you know that within our school day, we have an intervention class period that each language arts teacher has. Prior to this year, this class was called Reading Connections. Prior to this year, we did not have a systematic reading intervention program in place. So things were very dependent on teacher background, teacher knowledge, how hard they looked for materials for their kids. So we started planning and decided that our best option was to fully align with what we're doing at the elementary level. This is a significant shift for our teachers. If you are a middle school or high school English teacher, you are trained to teach English, and you are not trained necessarily to teach reading. Some have reading backgrounds, but this is not studying a novel. This is how to improve fluency and comprehension. So we outlined a very clear implementation plan so that we would start this year with all of our English language arts teachers in that Reading Connections class doing the same assessment and intervention system that we're using at the elementary schools. So it also allowed us to then take that reading intervention data from our fifth graders that we've always gotten and drop it directly into what we're doing for students with really should be very little gap happening because of the transition to buildings. And I do want to say on all of this literacy, the literacy side of our school improvement plan, Julia Lowry is our language arts curriculum coordinator, and she's an instructional coach. And she has been awesome on doing this and making sure it's happening and keeping the full building leadership team updated on where she is, because it's her and her 10 language arts teachers and then special ed staff that are really doing the heavy lifting on this side. Then what we're developing this year to have as full implementation next year is Writer's Workshop. So we were really struggling as a building with the idea of text-to-reader match, and that's where we're headed with the reading interventions, Writer's Workshop, and then the next step, which is Reading Workshop. And what I mean by text-to-reader match is we have students who are at vastly different reading levels coming in at 6th grade. And this isn't about elementary schools. We have vastly different reading levels at 8th grade. We have 6th graders who are reading at what's called level Z, which is the high school level. It doesn't go higher than Z. And then we have 6th graders who are regular education students who came in this year at level L, which is 2nd grade. So we have got to instruct students at their level and push them from the level where they are. And so that is what we're aiming at with the literacy, the reading intervention and Writer's Workshop. So all this year, so when you say, what do you do on your Wednesdays? This is what we've been doing on our Wednesdays. I've been attending all of the language arts meetings with them this year. And we developed the plan for Writer's Workshop implementation with the University of Illinois and the Center for Education in Small Urban Communities. And they have 2 coaches, Kara and Sarah, that's how I know them. And they are with us every Wednesday. They've been in every 6th and 7th grade teachers' classrooms, modeling, providing feedback and support for implementation. The teachers at 6th and 7th grade who have successfully completed, well, they all successfully completed. The teachers that completed their first unit of Writer's Workshop, the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. They were hesitant at first because most people do not think that an 11-year-old can work on the same piece of writing for 3 weeks. Okay. And they can, and that's what we're finding is that if you have the right structure and the right strategies, we tried something new this year, having students gather around and sit on the floor. You see this every day in elementary schools, but it's this kind of unique strategies to this system. So we were very deliberate in rolling this out and providing the professional development support for it. And not saying on day one of this year all 3 grade levels are doing it. We don't have the capacity to support that. But the way we've rolled it out this year, the 6th and 7th grade teachers are doing another unit. They've asked, can we just go ahead and do another unit? We weren't planning on doing that till next year. And then 8th grade is, they all should be right now in their first unit, okay? That they're doing, and that would allow the coaches, because we've got 3 instructional coaches coming in and working, so 1 for each of the 3 8th grade teachers. So the next step in literacy and text to reader match is reading for all students. So when I first talked about the benchmark assessment system and the leveled literacy intervention, the BAS and the LLI, those are for struggling readers specifically, and that's an intervention. Readers Workshop would be universal instruction. So we're planning it. We are not doing this yet. This is next year. But we are the plan is that we have 1 teacher per grade level plus Julia Lowry, the department head, going to a full week training on Readers Workshop. We are scheduled to have a full day of training for Readers Workshop. And we're planning to partner still with the Center for Education in Small Urban Communities next year. And again, the coaches from the center are teachers who, when they were teachers, were using this system. So that's a lot of valuable support. And we think with the heavy training we're going to do this summer, we will probably be ahead of where we are now with Writers Workshop when we talk about Readers Workshop this time next year. But there's an investment in instructional materials and training that we're looking at. So I'm very excited about the work in this area. Before I go on, are there any questions about the literacy side of the school improvement plan? Not one. Okay, good. I'm so clear. All right. So the other side of the other side of our school improvement planning, and I framed it as it's about student behavior, but it really goes back to this other issue that Ms. Patton raises, which is school climate. And it's vitally important that we are constantly working to make the middle school years a more positive experience for our students. And that is a challenge in any middle school. It's the age of the children. But that's also not an excuse, and it's something that we need to constantly work on. So I can firmly say that at UMS, we believe that the only way to truly reduce negative behavior and to end racial disproportionality around school success, and school success is a lot of things. It's academics, it's behavior, it's attendance, means that we're embedding professional development for racial equity within what I'm going to talk about with restorative practices and behavioral interventions. So I do not see behavioral intervention, restorative practices, and racial equity as exclusive concepts. So they're very blurred in here, and that is this year, as we've had more autonomy with our racial equity professional development, that is the direction we've gone as a staff, is when we're talking about behavioral intervention practices, we also are talking about racial equity. And 100% of our racial equity PD is led by teachers and the folks on that building leadership team. Well, we'll get into that. I've talked too long already. All right. So around restorative practices, and this is great that Elaine went first. This is the framework that I think you have in front of you. I think it's hard sometimes when you're not living in it to understand all that's happening. So even within this framework that you see here, most of the time when I've talked before with the board, we're talking about conflict circles, and you want to know that process. However, the vast majority of the work is happening at the bottom of this pyramid in the lower intensity activities. And that is about relationship building, about kids developing a stronger connection between the school and themselves. And those are also key characteristics of improving student performance, improving student engagement, and reducing racial disproportionality. School connectedness is a massive key component to school improvement. So I have a whole list of things we've done this year around restorative practices. A lot of it is actually in response to what Elaine has found. I'm not really going to go into all of those right now. You might ask me, though. All right. I have a slide in here about the conflict circle process. I'm not going to do that unless you have a question. I have it there in case it comes up. I can pull it up. So reduction of negative behaviors. To demonstrate kind of how we're looking to approach negative behaviors, I decided to put in the schematic that I'm using with parents and teachers and students, which is how we respond to bullying or aggressive behaviors. And so some things that we've done, and I think you can see the arrow here, or not. There is no arrow. Never mind. We've tried to make accessing the ability to report a conflict much simpler. So the forms are available in paper. They're available online. Then we have a Google form on the web page, and it's back, the Google form, so that students and parents can report things. They can request to have conflict circles. They can request an investigation around what is perceived as bullying behavior. And then we're going to work through a process of how we respond to that report, how we respond to the knowledge that a student is feeling harassed or feeling victimized. So what we're doing, though, too, is providing some continuing professional development for all of our staff on how this process, and Elaine mentioned, when you don't just dismiss a student when they come to you and say, oh, you're just having girl drama. We have to take every situation seriously. We have to work with students on teaching them skills to resolve the conflicts. And our equity-based PD, so where this kind of pulls through, and I said it's all embedded, is we've got 4 specific strands happening. And they are all designed really to support restorative practices and to address the issues of addressing negative behaviors. We have given staff the choice. So on any Monday that we're doing our equity PD, you have the choice of which topic you want to attend. Secret, it's going to come out once I say it, is eventually they have to probably go through all of them. But right now it's a choice. So I guess they have a choice in the order in which they attend them. So for the last 3 professional development times, I've been working with Megan Stenzel, one of our teachers, and we're reviewing research. It's not heavy-duty research. It is professional journals is what we're looking at, and practitioner journals. Mr. Russell's leading a team that is looking at, okay, bring your classroom data, bring your grade book and your seating charts, and we're going to look at that and using an equity lens, and then specifically doing behavioral de-escalation strategies. And that is Kelly Crawford, and there are more people in the group. Sorry, I'm going to forget everybody. It's like I won an Academy Award, and I'm not going to remember. So Kelly Crawford, who's one of our district TCI, Therapeutic Crisis Intervention trainers, is leading that group. So if you're a teacher and you're really struggling with classroom management, you might choose to go to number 3. All right. If you are interested in becoming stronger and better at utilizing restorative practices in all your classrooms, you go to number 4. So the options are there. I think they're all important, that it's hard to do all of them all at once with 100 teachers. So we also know that our teachers as adult learners like the options. So back to the first slide, these were the big ideas we're focusing on this year. And I'm sure I only talked for 10 minutes. That was sarcasm, because I'm pretty sure I talked longer than that. How long was I, Carol? You're not timing me. Okay. All right. Thanks. Any questions? I have 5 more minutes? No? Okay. Lori said that.
do just a couple. Can you talk a little bit, so I do understand that a relatively small number of students take advantage of the conflict circles. I really appreciate that continuum, the pyramid that you had where, some students, take advantage of restorative conversations, but the pyramid at the bottom that all students access or have benefit, of. Can you talk, do you literally mean that every 6th, 7th, and 8th grade student, I don't know what, every day, every week, will participate in classroom circles, check-in circles, team building celebrations, and classroom-based practices?
One of those.
But all.
So I think in
across-
Elaine's slides, she talked that students reported 44% of the time doing one of these at least once a week.
Okay. So
Was that it,
that
Elaine?
relates to that.
Oh, 3 to 5 times a week.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's
Gotcha.
even better. 25% of the kids are doing it every day. And that's typically just an advisory.
Yeah.
In advisories, I can't believe we've been doing advisory for 5 years now.
Is that right?
It has become much more accepted among the staff and the students as this is part of our school and this is what we do. So my expectation and what we talk about is that you are doing something of this every day in advisory. Now, the honest answer, if teachers were being 100% honest and I had 100% surveyed, they're not doing one of those every day. That's the goal. And one thing we have started doing brand new as a kind of a team building and celebration is every 2 weeks now, every team meets for, we call it a team celebration. So the entire team, most teams are about 100 students. They gather as a group, all of the advisories, and they do celebration activities, all kinds of different things. One team did a softball tournament. I'm not exactly sure what that one was about, but they were having fun, and part of it is, it's building that idea of connectedness. Some of our teams do the celebration assembly once a week. So on those days, they're not doing check-in circles. Okay.
And then just one more, really a broader question, I guess, is, I really appreciate the inclusion of racial equity within the core professional development. I know that's been our focus within the district, district-wide. And clearly, each of our individual journey along that spectrum of understanding racial equity varies. And by our, I mean like us school board members, teachers, administrators, all of us are at different places along that journey of how we understand that. As a district, we've been focused on it for 2 years now, pretty much explicitly. In your view, do you feel like the staff at UMS is more or less on the same page of where about the importance of racial equity in the work that they do with students? Are we, are a majority on the same page in your view? Are we still pretty much along a pretty broad continuum of understanding?
There's definitely a continuum, but I think as a full staff, we're in a much better place than we were 2 years ago in terms of, for me, it's about our teachers and all staff able to have honest conversations about what's happening, and do we feel safe in talking about decisions we've made. Are we able to talk about our personal biases? That was last week's conversation. And so I definitely a higher volume. We collect data after every one of these PD sessions. They're very, very positive. We need to do more. So what I'm seeing is two main ideas. One is, where is all of this going? So those are the people who want an answer. They want the fix, right? So we're doing all this, but so what's the answer? Okay, well, there is not an easy answer, no matter how many times I say that. And then the other side of this would be the folks that think we should do even more. And there's
Even more?
Even more. And there's a lot more of those people. Yeah, like this is what we need to be doing all the time, every day. And so it's definitely a fascinating journey, and it's definitely worth the effort.
Okay, and
So,
it's
yeah.
not a big sales pitch anymore. Now it's just a matter of how fast do we go and are we doing all the right things, but it's.
Yeah, I don't know, for me in our building, I don't know that it was ever a sales pitch. It was a fair questioning, I guess is what I would call it. And I think we need to be able to justify what we're doing.
Yeah.
And those are good questions for any staff member to ask.
Yeah.
Yep.
Reasonable. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm glad to hear that.
Would it be okay if I ask a tangential question?
That is entirely up to the board.
So, I mean, it's related to racial equity and it's related to academics. So the dual language program is now
Mhm.
graduating fifth graders into coming into sixth grade. I was wondering what the plan is next year for dual
Mhm.
language classes. at the
Well,
middle
Joe's
school.
sitting behind me, I hope.
That's kind of what sparked it too.
All right. They're there. I've got them. It's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was actually in the sixth grade social studies today, and you have, it's just the coolest thing ever. So these, non-heritage speakers that are only learning it at school, explaining Chinese dynasties to other kids in Spanish, and wow. So it's fantastic. So I think Joe and I just met recently. Really, we're the growing pains are there in that we have to figure out how to staff this more and how we want to offer more courses in Spanish. The demand is there. We don't have any math courses, for instance. We're not currently offering science at all 3 grade levels. But yeah, we have that first group of kids are in 6th grade right now. So yeah, and they're good. So you may not know this, actually speak Spanish. And so to my ear, I can't tell a difference.
Really?
But I'm not that good, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Joe's much better at it. But I mean, to my ear, there's very little difference
Wow.
in the kids' ability to perform in those classes. So,
That's great.
mhm. Yep. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Joe, by the way, gets all the credit for that program being a success. So
Yes.
good job, Joe.
Yes.
Woohoo! All right. Set you up there. All right. I believe I turn it over to Mr. Abatessa unless there are more questions.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next year.
Or hopefully, don't be a stranger. you
Right.
know.
What? Yeah, so 9.0, sorry. I had all my PowerPoints spread out all over so I could follow along. 9.03 is a draft of an RFP that we wanted to bring in front of the board for some discussion. And Mr. Abatessa and I worked on this based on the recommendations from the Facilities Planning Committee that the board approved last year. Specifically, one of the recommendations that revolved around hiring a consultant to come up with a UMS UHS site plan or campus land use plan. And so what you have in front of you is a 2-page draft. There are actually some parenthetical sections that are need some work, and there are also some blanks that need to be filled in too. The reason why this is in draft form is because we wanted to get your feedback before we brought it to you for a formal first read. So as a study topic, that's what this is. This is a chance for you to say, this is the direction we want to head as a board. So let me just, for the viewing audience, read through sections of this. And Mr. Abatessa, if you want to jump in at any point, feel free. But I think I think that we have this pretty well taken straight from the Facilities Planning Committee recommendations. So the background information is simply information you already know. The Facilities Planning Committee met during the 16-17 school year to create a list of priorities for long-range facility planning. One of the approved recommendations from the committee was that the Board of Education engage a consultant to prepare a campus land use study of the UMS UHS campus that specifically addresses the following needs: traffic flow and parking at Urbana High School and Urbana Middle School. That includes things like wayfinding, the signage around the campus, parking itself, and then tie into larger community plans. For those of you who saw recently, the mayor came out with kind of a call to action regarding the kind of central hub of the southern part of downtown, which is currently Lincoln Square Mall and the Lincoln Landmark Hotel. And she came up with some ideas and kind of put out a challenge for people to plan. Well, one of the things that she talked about was the Broadway corridor that connects Crystal Lake Park to Urbana High School, with the exception of Lincoln Square Mall. And she really would like to see the Broadway corridor opened up into something on both sides of Lincoln Square Mall, something that really does connect the community. And so that's what we mean there by community plans. The second one is outdoor educational opportunities for both UHS and UMS students. That includes the effective use of green space and gardens. And then the large one that was kind of addressed by all of this was indoor educational needs of both UHS and UMS, explore and address the needs of the school-based health center, explore the possibility of adding or remodeling existing space for science, technology, engineering, art, and math, or STEAM lab or classroom space, addition and remodeling of existing flexible spaces, and explore the possibility of a field house for shared use between UMS and UHS. And then we left in there in the actual wording that was brought forward by the Facilities Planning Committee, other issues raised by stakeholders during the process. And so that's the first part. Are there any questions? I'm going to stop there.
And
Are there
on-
any questions or clarifications? Go ahead.
On this, on the additional remodeling of existing flexible space, you know, in that is the idea of makerspace as well for students.
Right,
Maker.
having like a maker space with the, for additional space, you know, having like a room set up or something.
Maker space, that's like a,
That's like an engineering lab where you would have
Maybe a 3D printer.
a 3D
Oh.
printer, a lot of kind of technology and engineering tools and
Maybe like a sound recording.
sure, it could be a variety of things. The Urbana Free Library has a small maker space in their basement that actually gets a lot of use from our middle school and high school students after school. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. We do want to talk about, when we talk about flexible spaces, one of the things that came up in the discussions last year and continues to come up with all of our principals is, you know, how can we incorporate more hands-on makerspace kind of opportunities for our students? Other questions about that section?
no, well, I mean, not questions about the section, but I guess because I don't really understand how the kinds of groups or individuals that are going to be responding to this RFP. I mean, there are people or businesses whose job it is to, because this, I mean, it just seems like such a long list of very different kinds of things. I mean, will they come in and do deeper analyses of what is a priority? Obviously, we can't do all of these things because it's one limited space, but how will this group determine what's most, you know, the biggest bang for our buck and
Right.
what this community really wants
So,
and that kind of thing?
I'm hearing two questions there, so I'll try and address them in the order that I heard them. One is, who's going to respond to this RFP? I think we'll have kind of two different groups of people responding. One are architectural firms that specialize in land use and schools. And another group could be people that I would group as urban planners, people that look at large spaces and they come up with large-scale designs. Obviously, one of the things that we want incorporated into this is we want there to be an understanding that there's going to be quite a bit of engagement with this community, with the entire community, from whoever accepts this RFP. And so that's a
Okay.
piece of this, is we're expecting them to do quite a bit of engagement. The second piece of your question is, how is that going to be prioritized? Ultimately, it will be the board's decision to prioritize the recommendations of the consultant. And so my vision is the consultant will come back with a variety of options and design plans and possibly even timelines to say, hey, here are the ways that this could work. And then the board would have some time to discuss those designs and presentations, much like we do with when we're doing a design process of a school renovation. You know,
Okay.
we have IGW representatives come back and talk with the building principals and the Board of Education with updates on how things are going and where we're at throughout the entire design process. In this case, that design process would be the end product. We wouldn't necessarily be saying we're doing this right now, because we'd have to find the money to do the next steps. One of the reasons why we want to have this ready is so that, to use an old term from a few years ago, to have something shovel-ready. Have a project that's shovel-ready, so in case there's funding that drops into our laps, in case there's a partnership with, you know, city or a, you know, wealthy donor that wants to, you know, beautify the campus,
Gotcha.
put up a, you know,
That's true. Uh-huh.
put up a maker space, something like that. We have something that's shovel-ready, that we can open up and say, hey, here are our priorities.
Gotcha.
Let's go for it. If you heard me speak on the morning news, I said that personally one of my priorities is the safety and traffic flow around the middle school and high school. And that's for both campuses, drop-off, pickup, parking, and access is something that I think both campuses need to look at. And I'm guessing Dr. Woods would agree with that statement. That's pretty much a high priority for all of us. And so we might come up with some wonderful plans that then the board says, hey, this is the highest priority. Let's take care of this one first. And we do that first. But we have a plan then that could say, here's phase 1, phase 2, just like the city has a plan for the boneyard beautification. You know, they started with, I think, section 8 or something like that. I don't remember which number it was, but it wasn't section 1. They started right here on Grigg Street, and they will move through that sections as they see fit. We can do the same thing with this campus land use study.
Okay, that helps a lot.
Okay. I'll jump quickly through the next couple sections. One, we have a section in there that is highlighted and bracketed. We're going to come up with a better legal description of the land. But specifically, one of the reasons for this is to take a look at kind of the north half of the campus. We sit on 22.5 acres, and that is actually being expanded to roughly 25 acres, I believe, with the addition of what I call the Block North, Iowa to Washington and Race to Broadway. The school district now owns all but 3 of those properties. And so one of the pieces of this plan is going to really focus on that northern section. I don't see a lot of space or ability to do much with the athletic fields,
Right.
the aquatic center parking lot, or the south side of the middle school entranceway there. And so we really want them to focus on kind of that northern block, northern portion of the block. However, we're going to look at the entire needs of middle school and high school. So that, we'll work on that before we bring that back to you. We left a blank in there about when we're going to have proposals due. My personal goal is that we have this back in a finalized form to the board for an approval of the RFP itself, so that we can put it out at the March business meeting. So we have about a month and a half to discuss this, work on it, finalize it, and then have you approve it at the March business meeting. which means we would probably have it posted out there for a month or so to respond to the RFPs, and then, you know, you would obviously be the ones approving the work itself. And then, okay, so the next section is fairly much, the last paragraph on that first page, I'm sorry, is pretty much just a legal phrase that one of our attorneys put in. So the conclusion of the process, the selected firm will provide the district with a report that includes at a minimum a summary of the process and timeline. That means describing how they did their work. A minimum, so that we can all say, this is the stakeholder input that was generated. A minimum of 3 options for addressing each key area of need. A detailed description of and results from stakeholder engagement, a cost estimate for each of the options, and a list of possible ad alternates. I envision that as some kind of presentation, binder, book. It will be a roadmap for this district to follow, probably long after most of the people sitting around this table is gone, because that's the way this district likes to work, is come up with a long-term plan. I mean, I still go back to the newspaper article I found from the 1980s that had, hey, the district wants to buy all of these houses as they become available. And that was the 1980s, and now we're sitting here talking about we have 3 properties left. Only one of them is one that might ever become available to us.
Gotcha.
The other 2 are part of that northwest corner block that includes the old Sunshine Grocery and the what's currently the Pottery
Co-op, yeah.
Co-op studio. Selection for criteria. It goes through a list of selection that are, again, are in line with what we do when we select an architect. And we'll run all of these by our attorneys again, but this is pretty much the last 2 pages there are standard RFP for this kind of work, for this kind of consulting work. And Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure that the board understands this piece. Because of the type of work this isn't necessarily a low bid kind of thing. This is a selection process. You're hiring a consultant, and so when we come in, we might actually have board meetings where the consultants present ideas about how they would do the work. They would present pieces of this criteria for selection to the board in an open session. We might have a screening process where we ask 2 or 3 members, or I'm sorry, 1 or 2 members of the board to sit with some administrators and do some selection of saying, who do we want to interview? And because it's a consultant that's providing a specialized service, the board gets to select, hey, this is the service that we want. And so, again, we will have that opportunity. It's not like putting out a bid for school buses, you know, where we have to go by the lowest bid. Because of this kind of work, you have some flexibility in saying, I like the work that this person does. They impressed me in the interview. I want to see what they can do with this project. So, any questions right now? This is a first read. Gave it to you. Please go over it with a fine-tooth comb. Send questions to me, Mr. Abatessa, Carol. Did you want to add anything?
No, you can send me any questions or concerns you have, you know, if you want.
Yeah. And we will be happy to respond to those, to incorporate them, to bring them back for more discussion. I think that's, my plan is at the next board meeting, we'll have a time for administrative report to have some discussion about this, ask some questions, put it out there. This is not the kind of work that we can do in an exec session, but much of this work is kind of an administrative teamwork, but we want as much board input as possible because this is setting the course for what this kind of the center of our district and the one spot in the district where every student and family that comes through Urbana sets foot on, and you know, at some point in their educational career, whether they're a fifth grader, a seventh grader, or a junior in high school, you know, this is the congregating point, and we want to make sure we do this right. Any further questions?
So it sounds like you're hoping that the district will hire this consultant before the end of the school year.
Yes. And I'm guessing, based on speaking to other superintendents and speaking to a few architects who respond to this kind of work, the kind of scope of this is definitely a kind of 9 to 12 month scope of work.
Oh, okay.
So it will take about a year or a school year to get this work done.
Are we going to need to explicitly call out to the Park District as a you know, a stakeholder as they share the aquatic center with us?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think we will definitely reach out to three main entities that I'm thinking of that have been in my head the whole time. And I'll start with the Park District, even though they're not the first main entity that I've been thinking about. I've been thinking a lot about the school-based health center because they are right now in a transformative process of changing ownership from their Decatur company to local Presence Health. And as they work through that process, hopefully that will come to some kind of conclusion or actual switchover as of July 1st. It's a perfect opportunity for us to kind of say, what do we want the school-based health center to be going to the future too? And then so Park District, school-based health center, and then the city itself. Because I said the city is looking at plans as well. And yes, obviously we'd engage or would require this company to engage people like CUATS and MTD and First Student and anyone involved in transportation and planning, safe routes to schools, all of those people we would expect them to engage with. And those are things that we could lay out in here. My one concern about laying them out by name is if we miss someone and then they say, well, you never told us to talk to company XYZ. Well, I would rather have it be broad and then the board can give some direction or administration can give some direction as we go through the process.
You mean OSF, Don, instead of Presence, since Presence is no longer?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, any more?
That's exciting.
Okay, so the board's homework is to look over this with a fine-tooth comb, generate
Yeah.
questions, email them to Mr. Abatessa and myself, and come back to the next board meeting with additional thoughts or questions if you have them.
Good.
And one thing I would advise the board, if you haven't, just really observe that drop-off pickup. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's whoa, yeah, really, I sat there one day and really observed it about 3 years ago, and things still, so it should be, we've just been lucky, a priority. So, now moving on, there is no policy review at this time. There's no call for future meetings at this time, so Don will let you do the superintendent's report.
Yeah, so I have a fairly short superintendent's report tonight. First of all, related to equity in action, we are pleased to announce, and this we put up on our district webpage at the middle of January, Urbana School District is planning to apply for the 2018 21st Century Learning Communities Center grant. They have been very successful grants in our school district. They provide great opportunities for students to have educational opportunities after school, educational opportunities that extend their school day, that supplement their school day, and we're looking forward to expanding those programs with this 2018 round of grants. And so we're required by the Department of Education to notify the public when we are applying for one of these, and so our intent to apply was put up on the website, and I'm also speaking to our viewing audience. Under Excellence in Action, a couple things. One is Urbana High School senior Joey Wright's Echo article about Urbana Public Television's Jason Liggett was featured, and obviously those are two names that you recognize quite a bit from supporting the board, supporting our athletics and Urbana Public Television. Joey Wright wrote a kind of a biographical sketch of Jason Liggett and Urbana Public Television, and the city of Urbana put that up as a feature story on their main webpage. So if you go to the city's website, you hit Joey Wright's article, his first thing is "Welcome to Urbana," and here's Jason Liggett written by Joey Wright for the Echo. And it's nice because it links to the Echo's webpage, and so you can go right there. The city is one click away from the school newspaper, and you can read all of the great articles that all of our students write for the Echo. I also want to remind the board and the viewing public that tomorrow, Wednesday, February 7th at 7 p.m. in Oscar Adams Gym at UHS is the District Choral Festival. And the UMS choral students will be joining the high school choral students for a district-wide celebration of song. And I've heard that there are some great things planned for that in terms of large joint choruses of all the middle school students and all the high school students singing together. And if you haven't been to a middle school concert in a while, I would encourage you to come out, because the middle school choir has been growing exponentially, I would say, both in numbers and in talent. So I sat in on one of their classes last week and was very impressed with the singing that was produced by the I guess that was a group of 8th graders that I was sitting in with. So that's tomorrow night. And then engagement in action. This month, February, we celebrate not only Black History Month, but also on February 12th, we're celebrating as a district National African American Parent Involvement Day, or NAPID. It's a day for parents to visit their children's schools, see what their children's experience at school, and support their children's education. All schools, from early childhood through the high school, will be celebrating NAPID on Monday, February 12th, 2018. I gave the board a copy of all the list of events, what's happening at each school, and so you have that at your places. That will also be shared out by individual building principals, and we'll put that up on our website as well. So that's that. And then finally, related to engagement, is Thought Exchange survey regarding the expansion of the dual language program it's active and open and in full progress right now. Joe, I haven't checked the numbers, but last week when I took it, we had what I thought was a very large number for the first couple days of participants and thoughts shared. And I would encourage board members, if you haven't taken it, look up the email or shoot me an. Okay, so we've had 247 participants so far with 880 thoughts. We'll continue to push that out with reminders. We're also pushing it out through our website and social media. We're targeting specifically elementary and early childhood parents. However, it's open to anyone, and anyone can sign up and say, hey, I'd like to take this. So please do engage with that. It will provide administration and the board with a great deal of information regarding our expanding dual language programs. That's my superintendent's report, unless there are any questions.
No, I just want Mr. Woods to know I'll be at the middle school Monday on my lunch hour. Yeah, for NAPID.
Oh,
Huh? No, my lunch hour starts at noon, so I'll be there noon to 1.
7th grade.
Yeah. Okay, board reports?
I just have a couple of reports. I was able to attend the CU2C program that was at Papa Del's the other day, and it was very, very informative. I did pick up information, but I left tonight without it. But they just came out with a report card and also a new healthcare pilot program, which is very informative. They had a lot of slideshows of things that they're initiating. Also, CUTC is a movement program, and it's owned by partners. There's several partners in this program, and I was very happy to see that Don Owen and Yvonne Smith were actually part of it from Urbana. But they work with a lot of community agencies to help children from cradle to career and offer a lot of great programs. The other thing, I was able to go to lunch the other day with Scott Bennett, and it was very informative at First United Methodist Church in Urbana here. And it was a very good program that he gave, and learned some new things, so.
Any more reports? Okay, at this time I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was getting ready to move to adjourn.
Is-
Oh, yeah.
Second that.
Okay, motion passes.
All right. Aye. Aye, 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 aye. Thank you.